Now that's the problem with the earth. It's a big digression away from where we're supposed to be discussing, but I think it's very important that we do get some of these statements out when we get this opportunity to actually drop some of this knowledge. Because as some of these videos are going up and they're going to be floating, out in cyberspaces, we have to really let some of these points be very concretely known about what our stand is and what we represent in some of our teachings here as the foundation, because it's a revision essentially of African spirituality. That's what Ministry of Spiritual Logic, Ministry of Spiritology is. You see, it's set up and based here on the African continent, now operating from Accra, Ghana, as we're doing our research, building up our ministers, of course, training, preparing participants, and spreading the knowledge, essentially. You see, that's what our foundation and priority is. So let me also throw that inside there. I mean, if you're following, you're feeling that discussion, you see already, you should be clicking like down there, making sure that you're sharing this video out. That's how you start to become a participant. You hear us keep talking about participate. You see it. You're starting to realize that this is an underground ministry since 2007 here on the African continent, and we do have a broad, clear mission about what we are doing. You see it. So now that we're coming up, we're coming above ground from being underground, pardon me. It's something that it involves every conscious African who has identified themselves as being a part of that conscious community. Some people like to use the word woke, but I'm not going after woke as a fashion. You see, it's like I say, Ministry of Spiritology, we're purely objective. We know what we are doing. We have a petition, everything, orientation, what we are doing, where we are going. You see, that's why we've been underground, because we don't have this notion of being in the media showing our face. That's why we're set up, okay, let's use this YouTube channel and push independently from there. That was the idea that we had. So I hope you're all really going to follow what we're going to be doing and this discourse. I'm going to drop this knowledge on you, because Osir, Oset, and Heru, right? You have to understand that Osir, right, or what the Greeks called Osiris, or Set, what the Greeks called Isis, you see, or Heru, what the Greeks called Horus. Go ahead and jot your notes so that you get that down, you see it. These three entities or archetypes. Archetypes are multi-layered symbols. Some people might say it's a god. Some people will say it represents, Osiris represents our agriculture or regeneration, or Isis represents life force or fertility. You see it, or Heru represents the sun, or he represents light, you see. So that's why we call it archetype, because all of these values are true and can be understood and then applied in reasoning when presented in certain sequences, so that an individual who is studying the mythology would know what it means, and when he's even reading the Metu Neter, why a particular symbol is used in a context or not. That's what all this is important for you to really understand, right? But when you understand that Osir, Oset, and Heru, these three form the primordial trinity. Osiris represents the father, the original father, right? Oset represents the original mother. Heru, or Horus, right, represents the original child. It was very important that you reason this out, because when you start to see a lot of iconography of the Virgin Mother Mary with the, should they say, virgin-born child, Jesus, in the suckling position, you see it. All of that goes back to Oset and Heru, because some of the most ancient depictions of a mother and child, a mother suckling a child, are instead of Oset and Heru. Now, I'm not making any of this up, just like we're going to get into now this mythology of the resurrection of Jesus Christ, which is first precipitated with this idea of weeping for 40 days for Jesus as a Lent period. It also was constituted inside this Wepet Renpat. I mean, and we're talking back, and this is 2021, we'll say 31,050 BC with the Old Kingdom. I mean, that's at least 5,000 years of this tradition of Easter existing before the last 2,000 being in a variant form, 3,000. But we know that with now civilizations and cultures along that area going back down to the Nalubale, existing right back to the 11th century BCE, with the Enwine civilization and city being stationed where Rakotis or Heliopolis eventually was established. I mean, you see that this is an ancient festival. It's an ancient rite. Easter does not belong to Christianity. I mean, you just have to get that fact. The Christians can want to debate it by any means and claim that they somehow took it and made it better, but it's impossible to take something that is over 7,000 years at least and say you've instead approved upon it. You instead had to preserve something that if you had tried to eliminate it, it would have caused an uproar even. And we can even get into the details of how they systematically had to introduce Easter. And I mean, people didn't even notice the shift. They didn't even notice when they integrated Christmas even. You see, I'm digressing because they've always had the Wepet Renpat, essentially. And it was the Osiris resurrection myth in which they believed that after Osir had been slain by his brother Set, Set took his body and cut it into 13 pieces and scattered it throughout the kingdom, or perhaps throughout the entire earth. You see it. Now what happens is his wife, or Set, or Isis, goes searching now for the 13 body parts, you see, and groups them back together, including the phallus. This is a very intriguing part inside the whole mythos, you see it, because his penis was one of the 13th pieces that she has to find. And she joins it back together. And of course, you know, being a woman of mystique and power, you see, an archetype, having that force, life force, she regenerates him by binding his body together. You see, she of course brings Thoth. Thoth mummifies the body, wraps it together, the embalming process. And she's able to cause him now, with her life force, to resurrect, you see, just long enough that she can also copulate with his erect phallus, you see it, to impregnate herself. And in the context of doing this now, you see it, she's able to impregnate herself now and have what we know as the child Horus, you see, the child of light is able now to be conceived inside her. But without digressing into that aspect of the mythos, you see it, because this is going to entail now Heru coming later now to challenge Set, you see, the evil uncle, the dark brother of Osiris, of Osir, you see it. But to keep in the context of the mythos specifically, you see, because she only has enough power to resurrect him for a time now, and she had to consult Thoth now to also do the embalming, you see, with Anubis. What happens is that Osir is not allowed now to fully resurrect into the realm of the living, but he now has to spend a portion of time inside the land of the dead with Nephthys, you see. And this is what now creates him having a reign over the underworld, and as well having an archetypal dominion over the regenerative forces of agriculture up on the earth, you see it. And in this pageantry now, the ancestors had kept this traditional pageantry, essentially, a mythology, where every year when they would acknowledge that Sirius A would rise and then the inundation of the Nile would start to flood, they would essentially know that Osir has died and resurrected. And his wife, Set, with his sister, Nephthys, with the archetype of the underworld, has gone out now, and they've participated in a rite, actually, which it was given a particular name under the word Pat, though I've not noticed it, essentially, but it was sort of essentially a weeping of Tammuz, essentially a festival in which it was commemorated with its dedication to Isis, or Set, and Nephthys, also with a procession of 40 days, weeping, lamentation, wearing of ashes and sackcloth for the death of Osir. This period in which they knew that symbolically they were waiting for the appearance of Sopdet of the Sirius A star to herald in the New Year period for his resurrection. You see it. The interval before that was also dedicated, like Lent is done today in the Christian tradition. So though it's mid-July that they would have had their own or set, which when it becomes now Greek, you see, the Greeks didn't call the rite and the name of that archetype or set. They instead pronounced it as Isis. And in this, could we say, evolution of that particular pronunciation, it's derived from the Babylonian pronunciation of the same rite for when they also recognized their own planting season with its relationship to the vernal equinox. And the Babylonians called their own rite Ishtar. So when the Babylonians called it Ishtar now, it migrated. You see, this is a tradition that we know it came out of Kemet specifically for this. You see it, because in its Canaanite form, it was practiced and called Astarte. And even if you read the Bible, you read about the Ashtaroth and the Astarte and all of those references to the fact that the Hebrews or the Hyksos were picking up this practice from the Canaanites before you read of the weeping of Tammuz in Ezekiel chapter 8, 14 verse, something, whatever have you. But the migrating tradition of Set became Ishtar under the Babylonians, referred to Isis in the Greek, then became Astarte under the Canaanites. And then finally, upon reaching now the Norse traditions of the Greeks, it was specifically referenced as Ostern. It was a festival called Ostern and dedicated to an archetypal feminine entity or goddess called Ostara. And in some forms, it was celebrated specifically at the equinox in the Norse traditions and also given the title of Oster, that is E-O-S-T-R-E. Now, it's very interesting because this Oster or Ostre, we have to understand that the Anglo-Saxon migrations are also, of course, from Germanic clans and tribes. And they preserved that name when they migrated from the continental European mainland into the British Isles. And that is where we now have the maintenance of what was Ostern under the Norse traditions from Astarte, from Ishtar, from Oset, now becoming Istar or Ostre in the Anglo-Saxon tradition, and what we have in English today as just Easter. From Ostern referencing the dawn, the rising dawn from the east, the sun rising in the east, you see it. Because all of this has to herald in the beauty of the equinox and solstices and the earth and its rotation around the sun and the sustenance that it gives to the planet. Not as something to worship, no. But just in a simple cosmological valuing of the importance of it. You see it, it's a natural sequencing that our calendar even corresponds to, all of this, the sequencing in days and nights. So that's just to give you a general understanding, I hope, of the Kemetic mythology. You see it, because now when you see that Oset was able to resurrect now Osir at this period, it's just been continued now in these various forms as a tradition that people and cultures have always heralded and anticipated their planting season in context with the vernal equinox, which coincides with us every March 20th, 21st or 22nd or 23rd, you see, depending on the speed of the Earth as it's making its migrational orbit around the sun. Now, I don't want to go too far. I think that that is where we should actually stop with this particular recording. I know that we really could get into so much more detail and bring out so many more facts, but I think that we're going to keep all of that aside for a different side recording for, let's say, members who are actually going to want to engage in a detailed lecture on this particular topic, because it's just supposed to be freestyle lectures essentially. So we just dip into these topics so that you can get a feeling of what we do offer when we go into our detailed lectures in our ministry curriculum for our full enrolling members. Now, that's where we're going to really drop out, my people, honestly. You see, we're going to find another topic to come back at you on. And truthfully, I'm not going to give the cat out of the bag, truthfully. We've got a lot of information lined up as the sequencing of events for the year does unfold. We will know what topics to select. We're not going to give out everything that is inside the curriculum, of course, because then it means that we're not actually building a ministry as an educational organization which has a priority of systematically empowering individuals and making sure that we know the knowledge that we are giving them is actually fulfilling and creating that transformation in their lives. So We can't just come out and give everything out to you here, and we can't actually be dealing with you under supervision to actually see how you're actually growing and developing with it. So we're not going to do it like that. You see, like I say, Ministry of Spiritology is not about 3,000 people and a minister down there with the hand in the air following. No, this is knowledge-based. You know, I started my formation with 5%, you know what I'm saying, back in the day. And, you know, 5% coming out of the Nation of Islam is 100% knowledge-based, you know. That's just the orientation of what we're bringing out of Africa in establishing the Ministry of Spiritology. You see it. So, I mean, truthfully, let me just throw that in there. When you see me looking Islamic, just go ahead and get that feeling, you know what I'm saying? It's not like Arab Islam. If you've even seen that I'm pointing out the orientation with Sopdet or the Sirius A star in the Kemetic tradition, then you should already start understanding that we had the orientation in the naturalist tradition of Sopdet even before Islam did. You see it. And if you want to say before Islam, Islam and Kemetic tradition are one thing. Because when we talk even in the Kushite tradition of Tawhid, in Islam, they also talk of Tawhid, right? And that's just what they call it Islamic monotheism, but it's recognition of just what they call the one God or the one reality concept. And, you know, we're going to get into that idea of universal consciousness in subsequent discussions and lectures. I know this is just broadened out a little bit and kind of diffused a little bit of additional information I'm throwing in at the end of this lecture or whatever, you know, just taking advantage of the time or whatnot. But like I said, this lecture is where we're coming to a close. It's been choked. I know I delayed a little bit getting all this information out because right now we've got a lot just coming in that we're trying to put together to make sure that this year does start out right. Like we pointed out, our curriculum is going to be following the naturalist Earth gestation cycle from March 20th. You know, when it gets into the March period, that's when you know that the ministry is going to start its curriculum and its activities in full sequence. So we just had a lot sequencing with all of that. We're working on content regularly. We got a lot we're going to be uploading. We hope that you've been able to get the message from this particular recording and, you know, the information that we've been able to get. You appreciate it. Make sure you do click like, subscribe to the channel, share the information, talk to people, get the contact of the ministry. You can get involved in our virtual WhatsApp group. That's where we kick knowledge regularly. Pan-African, African consciousness, naturalist spirituality, 24/7, you know. And then from there now, we identify individuals who are participants who are interested in becoming dedicated members. And then we get you enrolled. And then we get you now enrolled. Now you get into the 3-degree curriculum system. And you get now into the first degree, understanding Christology. And then you get into the introductory Kemetai system. And then you get into the final degree, the Ministry of the Spiritology degree, all the metaphysics, everything, you know. So I think it is a very well organized, clearly oriented system. But we don't come rushing at you because what we're doing, like I say, this is transformation of the African continent, one soul at a time, each one, teach one. So that's why I'm going to drop out my people, truthfully. Like I said, make sure you like the video, you do click like, make sure that you do subscribe to our channel and share and continue to wait for the next video because we're going to come back at you. And after that, that's why I'm going to drop out, reminding you that I have been your naturalist minister, Nkanwe Fokwan Beth and Kala of Bafut. This is the initiation into the Ministry of Spiritology. That's right, it's the tribe in Kala. Peace, profound, peace, and we out.